You can ask the editors of the New York Times which of those two messages they're trying to convey, but it's got to be one or the other. I can't think of a third interpretation. Okay, that frightens people. Let's go on. Congress in October did pass a resolution authorizing the government to use violence. I should stop. Yeah, okay. Pardon? Yeah, I'm gonna, okay, one more minute and then I'll stop. No, she's right. They passed the I'll be like 1 minute. Yeah. Passed the, you can ask questions. Yeah, we'll go on with other stuff. They passed a resolution authorizing force because of the threat posed by Iraq to the security of the United States. Virtually the 1985 national emergency reiterated annually about Nicaragua. And it goes on from there. I mean, a lot of pretty awful things happened in the next month or two. My dear leader, tells me I shouldn't go on to talk about them, but they're worth knowing about. One more minute. Let me just run through a few things that happened in October. I mean, these are things that were either not reported here or barely reported. You can figure out for yourself how much you read about them. In October, there was a retrospective meeting, the 40th anniversary meeting of the missile crisis, Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. It was attended by key participants, high-level participants in the U.S., Russia, and Cuba. They knew at the time that it was a very dangerous period, the most dangerous moment in history. Kennedy's advisor, Arthur Schlesinger, described it as. What they found out last October just blew their minds. It turned out that the world was literally one word away from what would have been a terminal nuclear war. It was that close. 2 Russian submarines were they discovered that Russian submarines had been under attack by U.S. destroyers. The submarine commanders thought a war was on, meaning a nuclear war. They had nuclear-tipped missiles, and 2 of the commanders ordered them sent off, which would have led to a devastating nuclear response, wipe out Moscow. They respond by wiping out New York, and in a couple of minutes it's all over. The Eisenhower had warned even before that a nuclear war would destroy the Northern Hemisphere. It's not a joke. It was, why didn't it happen? Well, a 3rd Russian submarine commander countermanded the order. That's why we're around to talk about it. It was that close. Furthermore, all of this is extremely timely. The Cuban Missile Crisis was the result of a campaign of international terrorism that the United States was waging in order to achieve what's now called regime change in Cuba. Same notions that are right in the headlines now. Quite a discovery. I mean, the fact that isn't blaring headlines all over the place is pretty shocking. I don't think it was even reported here. You can check and see. Shortly after that, the UN passed 2 major resolutions, late October 23rd. One of them reaffirmed the 1925 treaty banning biological weapons. The second strengthened the Outer Space Treaty to ban emplacement of lethal weapons in outer space. Okay, those weren't reported at all in the United States, at least according to a database check done by a friend of mine. Why? The United States voted against them. It voted against a reaffirmation of the 1925 treaty banning biological weapons and against the treaty banning placing of weapons in outer space. U.S. alone voted against them. Israel voted with the U.S., but that's reflexive. It's like the Ukraine voting with Russia back in the old days. That's unilateral, therefore it doesn't get reported. Is that important these days? A treaty banning biological weapons or banning the placement of lethal weapons in outer space, which are likely to do us all in. Yeah, really important. Important enough so that the press understands that it's much better that citizens not know about this. Much too dangerous if they do know. And you don't unless you really go to exotic sources. Shortly after that, the Bush administration unilaterally terminated negotiations on a treaty to put enforcement mechanisms into a bioweapons treaty. There is such a treaty, but has no enforcement procedures. The Europeans and others are trying to put in enforcement procedures. At the last minute, the Bush administration told them, you're not going to do it. And in fact, there won't be any more discussion of it for at least 4 years. It's the next thing that happened. Then we go on to the war. There's plenty, with that going on, there's plenty of background for the fear and the hatred, which is enormous. International polls are just shocking on this. I won't go through them because there's lack of time. They're mostly not reported, but they're dramatic. Well, again, going back to that observer from outer space, assuming that, I think outer space people are supposed to be male, so I'll call him him, assuming that he has some concern for the human species, he must be wondering with amazement how long a free people are going to allow this to go on. And the answer is not very long. No, let's go on.
You want to go for questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Talk plenty. Yeah.
Okay. Join me again in thanking Noam Chomsky. Don't worry. We're going to have a few moments for questions. We have microphones on either side. Sorry. Please make your questions brief so that we have time. I think everybody here came to listen to Noam, so please make your questions direct and brief. I just want to remind you also that we do have to be out of the sanctuary at 5 o'clock. There's a service here, so let's keep it quick.
Okay, so there's two mics, one on each side.
Okay.
And we'll alternate.
Okay.
We'll start here.
Hello, Noam. We'll take one question from each side.
Yeah.
This is a question here, Noam. One of those killed in the war was a Hopi woman from the Arizona reservation. For those who don't know, Hopi means people of peace or peaceful people. And I want to get your comments on why, after the U.S. Basically butchered the indigenous people, they continue to use their name as weapons of mass destruction. For example, the Apache, the Chinook, the Iroquois, Tomahawk, and so on. So if you could comment on that, Noam.
I mean, it is absolutely shocking. I mean, it's as if the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, was naming its planes Jew and Gypsy. I mean, it's indescribable. You don't know how to talk about it. How can a culture accept this, naming your weapons of mass destruction after victims of genocide? It's something that should really bother us a lot. You're right.